And phase 2 consisted of a very detailed audit of the organizational structure of each of the 19 police departments. And what Banker did was he went out, and these gentlemen, some of these gentlemen on the panel can attest to it, he went out to all 19 local police departments in Somerset County, and he gathered their data. And he used figures current to, I believe it was 2010, and he estimated that, as Jack said, the aggregate cost of law enforcement in Somerset County, he used 100,000, it was actually 104.1 million, 104.1 million. And you have to remember that in 2010, there were about 672 sworn municipal police officers throughout the county. During phase 2, a regional prototype was developed by Mr. Banker, and again, these comparisons were made. They took into account essential operational and financial elements of the current method of policing and the Banker prototype model. Now, phase 2 culminated in a presentation to a relatively large group of governing officials. Some of you may have been there, municipal managers and supervisory police officers. That presentation occurred on December 9th of last year, and it featured Mr. Banker explaining his model for countywide police services in Somerset County. The Banker model, or the Banker report as it was referred to, broke down an $18 million savings. He proposed 3 police regions or precincts, had 1 agency head and 3 deputies, and he had a supervisor ratio of 1 to 4 or more, to the rank and file ratio, 100 or more fewer personnel, and his big thing was sworn officers not performing civilian jobs, and at the time, the legacy costs weren't addressed, so that $18 million figure didn't include legacy costs. Now, how was the $18 million going to be saved? How was this going to come across? And according to Tom Banker, these were the sources of savings. He looked at differential in scheduling, improved supervisor ratios, optimized service delivery priorities, civilianization of support functions, increased automation, full integration of communications, reduction in operating facilities, and standardization of equipment and systems. At that December 9th event, it was announced that Phase 3 would be the Prosecutor's Task Force on Regionalized Policing. That task force would be formed to drill down the details, and yours truly would serve as the chairman. I immediately chose Dr. Richard Celeste to share in what appeared to be at the time a good deal of pain in moving forward with the impending endeavor. And in fact, Dr. Celeste and I sat together at the December 9th rollout, and as my chairmanship was announced, the good doctor leaned over to me and said, "Are you ready for this?" And I looked back and said to him, "Are you ready for this?" So the partnership was formed, and perhaps because of proximity, we had our vice chairman. Now let me digress for a moment. You heard Jack talk about the times of our youth, and integral throughout Phase 1 and Phase 2 was my friend Jack Chettarelli. And for all intents and purposes, from my perspective, Jack has been the general manager, the coach, the quarterback, the water boy, the trainer and the cheerleader of this whole initiative. He's truly been a leader throughout. And I've known him, as he said, for nearly all my life. We both went to Kennedy School. He talked about high school. We were at the Washington School in Raritan. We played sports together. We umpired Little League baseball games together. And heck, in my prior legal life, I even represented the guy's business. Now, many of you might know that I was sworn in October of 2010. And within the first 2 weeks of my position on the new job, Jack comes to me with then County Counsel Tom Miller, who's another friend of mine, and they let me know that I was about to be appointed to lead a task force that will essentially look to dismantle the very structure that I was appointed to supervise and work with. So in merely a matter of weeks, it looked like I had gone from top cop to top rat. And I have to tell you that with any other process, that probably could have occurred. I got some dirty looks early on, but my experience throughout this And the way the phases and the task force have been structured couldn't have turned out much better. I'm going to speak a little bit more about that later. So let's go back to a review of Phase 3. Phase 3 initially involved the construction of the task force. And Jack can talk about my leadership skills all he wants, but the truth of the matter is I've got a lot of help. I've had a lot of help throughout this whole thing. Once it was constructed, Phase 3 consisted of an extremely detailed examination of the hypotheses of the banker model and the development by the subcommittees of defined components of the task force's own model for regionalized policing. The 6 subcommittees of the task force are set forth. I'm not going to read them. You can see them, and you're going to hear more about them as the subcommittee chairmen come up. In December, shortly after the Phase 2 presentation, a committee was formed to assist with the construction of the task force. We needed to identify its overall mission and outline respective charges and guidance for each of the 6 task force subcommittees. This committee was named SWAT, or the Special Working Action Team, in keeping with law enforcement tradition and protocol. If there's anything that I've learned over the course of the last 11 months, it's that law enforcement loves acronyms. I'm constantly asking my chief or anybody around me, what the heck does that mean? And they fill me in. So SWAT members consisted initially of Jack, County Administrator Mike Amorosa, Sheriff Provenzano, Rick Celeste, Bill Stahl, who's here, and Tom Banker, and former County Counsel Tom Miller also, before he took on the robe, his judicial robe this past May, was a participant on our task force. There was one other significant step that took place before we assembled the task force membership. In late January of 2011, the SWAT team and Mr. Banker invited the PBA and FOP unions and their representatives to a separate and private audience with Tom Banker. And I will tell you that the mood in that room was bone-chilling. Dirty looks certainly abounded, but there was an incredibly spirited discussion. And it was clear to me and probably every member of the SWAT team present that the police union representatives had much to offer to this initiative, and their participation in the analysis was indeed necessary. So in early January or early January and February, the task force membership was assembled. Now this was another interesting way of assembling a membership, and you have to give Jack credit. Each mayor of the 21 municipalities in Somerset County was asked to select 2 individuals to serve on the task force, and they did that. In addition, 12 representatives from the various police unions were appointed. We brought in 12. Initially said we're going to give you 6. They said we went back and forth, and they got 12. And there were 15 at-large appointees. I made the appointments with the advice and consent of SWAT. These were at-large selections that typically had something to offer to the group, some particular expertise that we could rely upon. There were lawyers, Chief Rose had an expertise with regard to computerization and law enforcement and things like that. So the overarching mission of the task force is very simple: investigate the feasibility, viability, and practicality of a regionalized police force. And Dr. Celeste initially took a crack at it. Jack and I then tweaked it a little bit, but a mission statement was prepared by the SWAT and adopted by SWAT. And that's your mission statement right there. On February 17th of this year, the task force convened an initial meeting, which served as a launch event and was attended by, I think, just about every task force member. There were nearly 72, I believe. And at that point, the baton was officially passed from Freeholder Chettarelli to me as the task force chairman. And at that launch event, Dr. Celeste and I gave a bit of a pep talk. The common theme was that the banker model was merely a starting point. It was a basis from which to start. Nothing more than a model. And the task force members, as Jack said, were directed to twist it, turn it, and beat it up and build a better model. In fact, if particular subcommittee concluded that regionalization just wasn't feasible, wasn't possible. We wanted to know that. That was a possible answer. This is not a fait accompli. The only caveat was, if you tell us that it's not feasible, we want to know the reasons why. Each subcommittee was given a specific charge in an effort to determine whether a countywide force is capable of being implemented, whether a countywide force is capable of continued functioning. It's one thing to put it out there, but can this thing sustain? And whether or not it's capable of achieving and sustaining financial savings. So those were the big three, but there was a fourth. And this is equally as important, if not more important. Each subcommittee was responsible for exploring enhanced operational possibilities which could lead to greater efficiencies in law enforcement. And that's the better model. If we don't save, and Jack has said this many times, if we don't save a dime, but if we can put together a structure that works better, doesn't it make more sense? And that's not to say, as Jack has said, that the local police departments currently aren't performing a very vital role in doing it well. So at the launch event, I announced that each of the subcommittees would be responsible to prepare a subcommittee report, and we set July 1st as the deadline for the preparation of those reports. I stressed that that deadline was not set in stone, and in fact, the July 1st deadline has come and gone. You all know that, and it's been extended until the end of the year. I believe that all the subcommittees are relatively confident that the respective reports will be completed by the end of the year, and in fact, one of the subcommittees has completed its report, and you may hear about that. What happened was, as the subcommittees got underway, it was very clear that this task was incredibly gargantuan. And I think that it took us a little bit of time to realize that. There have been times when certain subcommittees have made decisions. The precinct number, for example, you may hear Chief Kaminsky talk about this, and I don't want to steal his thunder, but there was a determination initially made that a certain number of precincts was the right fit for Somerset County. And in fact, I think 2 or 3 meetings later, they rethought the whole thing and came up with another number. There have been certain instances which we've asked subcommittees to throttle back, actually suspend your meetings until another subcommittee got ahead with what they were looking at, because there's a lot of interplay and cross-examination between these subcommittees. There have been occasions when 2 or 3 subcommittees have gotten together, representatives from 2 or 3 subcommittees have gotten together to explore ideas. So since the task force was initially launched, I can verify that these subcommittees have met with great frequency. Dr. Celeste and I have gone to a number of them, not all of them, thank goodness, but we've gone to a number of them. And my personal observations are that the task force members, as we've asked them, have taken their responsibilities very seriously. They are grinding it out. A few of the subcommittees are, as I said, near completion. One is completed. The current legislative scheme, and in particular the Uniform Shared Services and Consolidation Act, presents some serious challenges. You might hear some of the chairman talk about that. Challenges to our consolidation effort. Legislative reform might be necessary, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later on. The most important thing that I can say is that the varied backgrounds of the task force members have greatly contributed to the effective examinations currently underway in all of our subcommittees. And I want you to see this because it's pretty remarkable. We have 11 police chiefs and 1 police director, 10 mayors, 9 municipal administrators, 12 representatives of various police unions, 8 members of municipal governing bodies, a number of police officers, a sheriff's officer, and a couple citizens at large. I think thanks to Mayor Liptak. I'd like to also point out that we've relied on a number, as I said before, a number of individuals who possess particularized skills and have graciously contributed their time to this effort. The task force certainly thanks them for their dedication. As I've said now, the deadline for the subcommittee reports is December 31st. Once I get those reports, Dr. Celeste and I are going to work on synthesizing them and preparing a final report. That should be done by February 28th of 2012. And then the final reports, along with the subcommittee reports, bound all together, will be shipped out to the 21 municipalities in Somerset County